we've all been waiting for some time, but you know, let's exercise grace like they were saying, because what they're trying to do here is very important. So, financing the impossible. So for the panel, we do have some speakers that's going to be joining us. Yomi, which is going to be one of them, he just spoke. So if we can have Yomi come up. Also, we do have Mezuo joining us as well. Thank you. Okay. Ismael, Fanny, if you could please join us up here. And then Uzoma Eze. So it's really nice of you guys to be supporting this initiative. And I'm noticing that a lot of us here are actually Nigerian. So I'm going to try to find a way to tailor our discussion so that it is inclusive of the African continent, because I know that you guys have done research on the Savannah Belt. So I don't want to neglect that, but I do have to also address the fact that a lot of us here are Nigerian, right? So, you know, I do want to include Nigerian struggles as well. So the first question that we're going to be talking about is, I kind of want to know you guys' why. So we'll start from each person and figure out why it is that you've started on your venture and embarking on, you know, supporting Africa in the way that you have. So, you know, just tell us a little bit about yourself. We're going to start from my right here with Uzoma, and then we'll go from there because Yomi already shared some stuff. So, here.
Okay, glad to be here, guys. I'm Uzoma Eze. I'm a practicing attorney, I'm a CPA, and I'm also a founder of a digital payments platform, a money transfer company here in Texas called Aid Money. The AID, it's AIDEMONEY. The AIDE stands for Africans in Diaspora Engagement. My passion is the African diaspora and how we're able to connect the 50 million people of African descent who are currently in America back to Africa. So all of my work and my practice always touches on that. So when you guys called me and the name of the program was enough to get my attention, and that's why I'm here. I'm here because you asked me to come. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Ismael Fanny. I'm originally from Côte d'Ivoire, so not far from Nigeria. So, but I'm here today to bring, maybe I define myself as an impact investor. I know it's a general term and it mean, but it's the only way for me to explain that. I wanted to do investment. I want to do all the great thing about private equity, private debt, and all type of things. But I wanted to have a social component that make me do it. That was how I define it. That's why I'm back. I work in Africa. I also work for 5 years in a different Africa, in the Caribbean region, where you see people that left the continent on slavery. And you get there and you find another Africa. They adapt, they pivot, it's different. It's no longer African by the same thing that we see in the continent. But you see some of the things stays. The funny part is the cooking and you know, we eat the same cassava and the same things, and that's great. Thank you.
Good to be here, and I think first I'd like to say I'm inspired by all of you and how you've organized this conference. Very well done. And the second thing I wanted to quickly say is Yomi earlier made a comment that the best analysts come through his firm. And he's a good friend of mine, and they do have good analysts, but of course we have good individuals as well. I say that in jest. Managing partner of Sahel Capital, we've raised $100 billion from different investors, local, international. We invest across 13 countries in Africa. We do equity, we do private credit. We have offices in Kenya, Nigeria, and in Côte d'Ivoire. And also co-founder with my wife, 2 other companies, a food manufacturing company that does spices, seasonings, packaged food, exports, B2B sales, products in supermarkets. and also a consulting firm. We have a 100-team group of consultants that do specialist agricultural work across the continent. And there are two whys for me, why Africa and why we're doing what we're doing. The first why is actually an interesting one because I went to Carnegie Mellon University, graduated, had a job offer in Dallas with a firm, and really had no intention of, or no plan to go back to Africa. And went home for the summer because I had a couple months before I started work, and really just planned to spend time resting, hanging out, not doing much. And what was interesting is I met a friend of mine then at the airport, who is now my wife, and asked her, what is she doing for the summer? And she had an offer with McKinsey in Chicago, but I planned to work in Nigeria that summer. So of course I said, I'm going to work as well. And I actually got an internship in the same building where she was. So, very, thoughtful about that process. But had an incredible experience that summer working for a firm. And then went to Dallas, and it was just completely different. I didn't feel the same connection working with that firm in Dallas that I did with that short time in Nigeria. So in the back of my mind, it was this just because it was 2 months, or was there really an opportunity to do something on the continent? Went to Wall Street, worked with JP Morgan doing M&A, and then decided before business school, let me actually spend some time working in Nigeria to really see, is there an opportunity here? And if there was, I'll go to business school and then come back to Nigeria, and if there wasn't, business school was my exit back to the US. And I went back for what was supposed to be a year. It became 2 years. Was involved working there, started some businesses, and was really motivated by the impact I could have in people's lives and also building businesses. So went to business school and then came back to Nigeria and have been there on the continent for over 20 years now. The second why, in terms of why we're doing what we're doing today, was working in Senegal in 2009 and was shocked how much food was imported in supermarkets, not just in Senegal, but in Cote d'Ivoire, in Nigeria, across the region. And a lot of that food could be produced locally versus imported. But there was hard work that needed to be done to build the local supply chains. So if I made the decision with my wife to let's actually go build ourselves, and then left corporate Africa, became an entrepreneur, and then went through the journey of trying to build different firms, and then to where we are today as an investor back in entrepreneurs. But I'll pause there, and we'll go into some of this detail a bit later.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I need one.
Oh, you need one.
Okay. I thank you guys so much for sharing your why. I think for what a lot of us want to do in Nigeria, and I think for what RAADE represents, having that really strong why is important because there are going to be challenges, right? And as long as you guys are, steadfast in your why, and it's, something really meaningful for you, regardless of what those challenges are, like these guys, as you've seen, you will persevere, right? So thank you again for sharing your why. So the next round of questions are going to be pertaining to blended capital models. I'm just going off of the list you people send me. So we're going to talk about, and I know Yomi said he's not that technical, so maybe we'll relax small, right? I was going to ask Ismael, because I know that, you work with the IFC, so maybe if you can explain to some people in the audience who aren't familiar with what blended capital models are, what it is, and then we'll speak on how we can, utilize that type of model to make significant changes in Africa.
Thank you. So I will take it. There is a basic blended capital or blended finance. It's just like mixing, to simplify, is mixing commercial terms like loans with grants, and trying to put both together to have like affordable or push. There's different motive for that. Sometimes you want to push a specific team. For example, climate. Canada is a big donor for climate related blended capital or those type of things because they want improvement on the climate side. Sometimes it's gender, because also we need more on most of the time, most woman representation. So sometimes you have some specific like thema like that. Sometimes it's driven by the country. There is certain country without blended finance, it's almost impossible to do things. And sometimes it's related also to the political situation regarding the Sahel region, for example, not Sahel capital, but the region with the coup in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, all of those type of things. So you need that. So that's the big picture. There is different. There can be many other reasons to do that. And I'm not talking about politics, sorry, on the recent things, but there is things to do that. So the principle is blending the two. So simple example for people to get me on that. It's not gonna be like you have 1 million loan and 1 million grant. It's not gonna appear like that. It's like if I would have done a loan, for example, recently I'm doing a transaction, and given the macro context and etc. in Haiti and those type of things, if I have to do a loan in local currency for a company in the beverage sector in Haiti, the interest rate is like 40%. You know, this is too high for the company. I know it's local currency and etc. There's so much fluctuation in currency and those type of things. So I'm building a donor funding. Say he won't really want me to do something in Haiti, and he said, let's price this loan at, for example, 10% to the company. The difference, the 20%, will calculate how much is make on the swap market and etc. over the time of the loan, and this will be covered by a grant. So by doing that, we're doing like a blended finance, and then we get into that. Sorry, I've been long, but that's the principle.
Okay. Mezuo, did you want something to add?
Yes, we actually have 3 types of blended financing in some of what we do, just to give some context. So with our first fund, where we raised $66 million, the original genesis was the German government wanted to work with the Nigerian government to create a new type of fund for the agriculture sector. But they realized investors would be concerned about the risk around investing in the sector. So what the German government did is through KfW was to say, I will give $14 million to match the government's money. I'm willing to take a much lower return from a risk profile perspective, and you can use that to unlock other types of capital, and which was pretty innovative. So it's a sort of public-private sector partnership. It has some government money to the fund, and then we raised and deployed. In our current equity fund that we are just about to close in the next few months, that same entity, KfW, also put a first loss tranche. And the way to think about first loss, it's junior equity. So if things go horribly wrong, they would take the hits first before anybody else. If things go well, everybody shares pro rata. So if everybody's saying, I want to back this capital, I want money to go to this sector, I believe the risk is overstated, but just to give you comfort, if something goes wrong, I'll take the hit first. So that's the second in one of our funds. In our private credit fund, we have so we lend dollars to companies across the continent. We also want to do local currency lending. But the issue with local currency lending is you have a dollar basis. How do you price this currency devaluation? What does it mean? And it's very difficult to hedge. So for many African currencies, if you try and hedge, the cost of the hedge prices you out of the market. So it just doesn't work. And if you're doing equity, the hedge potentially takes all the return you would really like. So we got some grant money that allows us to actually subsidize the cost of the hedge when it becomes too expensive, to make sure we can do local currency lending. We have the FX currency protection, and we can still price at a manner that works for the companies and is competitive. So we've used it in 3 different ways.
Okay, very interesting. Did you want to add something?
All I want to say is we are actually a beneficiary of IFC's blended finance. So on our first fund, we were able to get their commitment from 10 to 15 because they had another bucket that basically looked at us as a first-time fund manager. It was able to demand less than commercial returns. And so because of that, we could get more money from them. So that's just my contribution.
Okay. And I was going to ask you, Uzoma, I guess.
I had a little bit of a perspective there. So these guys are the real deal. These are finance people, okay? They get it. They're speaking a language that I'm having a hard time keeping up with. But I'm a lawyer, so I know a little bit about what they're saying. It's a perspective that I have on that, and this is the perspective. When I think blended finance, it's this idea that as entrepreneurs, the one thing that everyone on this stage has in common is unconventional thinking. Take convention, throw it out the window. take originality, figure it out, come up, ask why not. So when you're trying to raise money, okay, how do you raise money in a business? Equity, shares. Debt, you borrowed money. Grant, somebody dashed you money. Okay? And you run the business and there's operations capital. Those are the 4 ways money comes into a business. So when you're going to raise money, you don't silo your thinking. I'm getting debt. I'm borrowing. I'm getting equity. I'm only selling shares. I'm getting grant. What they're saying with blended capital, if you want to understand the street level, is just any mix, however it works out. Now, the reason I know this is because I'm the guy who writes the agreements. All I want to know is, what is your business idea? I can put it on paper and turn it into a product, and it becomes a blended finance. So the idea is, you have to be, your job is to be creative and then come to guys like us and say, this is my idea. And they will say, okay. You can pull this in, pull this in, pull this in, paper it so and so and so, protect it with so and so and so, and you've got yourself a way of raising money that was unique.
Sorry, I love that, Uzoma. So now, let me join Uzoma on the real. So, blended, that's the technical term, and I like what he said. What I tell entrepreneurs many times is that nobody wants to look stupid. The entrepreneur doesn't want to look stupid. The investor that's managing money doesn't want to look stupid. So how do you structure something that protects everybody's ego if things go bad? I think people always structure thinking, the entrepreneur is like, this thing is going to be 100. Okay, the investor is thinking, what if it goes to 20? So that's what the structuring does. And I always tell people that, look, how about we find something that, if things go to 100, I get my returns and I give my returns to my investors, but maybe I leave some upside for you. If things go to 20, there's a minimum I'm required. This is where structuring and creativity, regardless of the technical terms, when you're open to that mentality of being fair and not letting everyone be stupid, you can come up with creative structures that can be very blended, not necessarily in these technical terms, but that uses different instruments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I know maybe you guys probably have questions, but we'll wait till I ask all my questions first. So now we're going to talk about de-risking, right? Because investing in Africa comes with a lot of risk. There's we have the very vulnerable population, lack of infrastructure, and stuff like that. So when it comes to managing risk, what tools have you guys found that are helpful, or that you look for in like specific investments or to invest? I guess to kind of help mitigate those risks. Do you know if that makes any sense? If you don't understand my question, I'll try again. Okay.
I mean, your question is so open. There are risks on different levels, right?
Yeah.
And so today we back growth businesses. We don't back founders. So first question for you is it just how we mitigate risk in investing, or should we be focused on entrepreneurs that are starting?
Well, I mean, I think you guys have different focuses,
Okay.
right?
The first thing we do is, because we manage institutional capital, right, which by all means we can't go to zero, right? Like we can't lose the money. First thing is we look for some kind of track record. Now, because we invest a little bit earlier than many of our peers, part of the reason because we're startups, one is we want to see 3 years of operating and commercial track record. Remember what I said earlier. We want to see lessons learned. We want to see mistakes made. We want to see, what are the things that you figured out that you've learned on and you're ready to scale. So we invest for scaling. But I think first is we back people. I always tell people that if you invest in a great business with the wrong founder that you're not aligned with, you will destroy value. You will argue somewhere down the line when things are going good, and you will get into the court. Or if things are not going well, he or she wouldn't listen to you. So the first thing is the teams. Who are we backing? Are they humble? Are they collaborative? Because there's a lot of hard work to be done. Then supply chain, right? We always, before we look at any investment, we look backwards and we look forward for the supply chain. But then there's a lot of structuring. It's part of what we just said about instruments. So one of the things people talk about is FX. Like today I manage mostly dollars in local currency businesses. So there are minimum requirements I have from local currency businesses. Number one, I need 50% or about or more of your inputs to be either localized or for us to be able to localize it. If not, your cost will always go up when there's devaluation and you can't pass on the cost. That's the first thing. Second thing is we value businesses in local currency. You know, even if I'm managing dollars, I value your business in local currency, right? So that, and then I tranche my investments. That means I break my investments up so that I give you what you need at a certain time, I let you achieve milestones, and I give you more later. That way, if there's devaluation, I'm giving you the same Naira but less dollars. I'm basically protecting downside risk, and I'm also seeing how you perform before I give you the whole box. Final thing is we're very hands-on. We are actually very hands-on. You know, we did a lot of startups. Like I said, we know that founders are wearing more hats than they should be wearing. So on coming in on day one, we want to understand which of those hats do we take off the founders, which of the hats do we find third-party guys to play, and then we're very closely monitoring. I think let me stop there and pass it to my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Yomi. I 100% agree, Yomi, about the people. And interestingly, this question you asked, I would have answered differently 7 years ago than from today, in terms of risk management. 7 years ago, there's a great business opportunity. We can structure anything to mitigate risk. And we're very creative about all the structures we would use to mitigate all the risks we'll think about, we'll structure it. And we've had some painful lessons that are about people. And the deal today, and I won't mention the deal name that is the most painful for me, is where great opportunity, dollar export revenues, we took a majority position because you're in control. You appointed management. You had founder who was much older retire. So we're fully in control of this business that's exporting dollar base, fully structured all the rights and protections and the legals. The company begins to make money, and the older founder says, you know what, I want my company back, and you know, my son is not going to be MD. And we're like, okay, that's nice and fine, but we're majority, we control the board. And then all the unexpected things you don't think about from a legal perspective was sending, you know, people to chase away management from the factory, the kind of things you hear about that happens in Russia, you know, happened, and lost a lot of value. And I think from that time for us, it is really people in tough times, because there always be tough times. Can you have hard conversations with your partners and still work together to resolve issues and move forward? Are you aligned? What does it mean? So now we spend more time trying to figure out alignment of values and people, and any small sign that we see that there's misalignment, we run for the hills. Because the pain, the memory of the pain we went through on a great opportunity that should have made lots of money is a lesson for us to say, you know what, end of the day with the people, because even with if you have the right partners, when you go through tough times, you can work with those partners to figure it out and to fix things. But if you have the wrong partner, it goes a very different way. So for us, the risk mitigation for us that we try, and I don't think we're perfect, but it's upfront. How much time do we spend upfront really getting to know people? Even if it takes extra time, who are we speaking to? How do we think they will behave when they've gotten the money? And yes, we tranche, we give a little bit of money to see how people react, but that for us matters more than all the legal structuring we could do. We still do the legal structuring, don't get me wrong, we still do it, but the people have the greatest impact on the outcomes versus the legal structuring.
Thank you, thank you. You know, I just want to say something personal. You know, I'm an actuary by training, so when you talk about risk, it's just like you open so many area on my head about risk. And second things I will do, like Yomi, I'm a little bit afraid of talking about IFC when you have Dr. Obi, Vice President of World Bank, you know, sitting. So please. So in terms of risk, I will say there is the first question is equal to your first question. Blended finance, first loss that you mentioned, and those type of things are tools that we have, and we have great lawyers that will structure the term in the fact that we protect it, etc. And that's the technical aspect I can see on that. But the second things that coming is I have been an entrepreneur. And I'm defining myself sometimes as entrepreneur because I always have idea. My friend is telling me, you always have opinion on things and etc. Every time you see things, say, oh, let's do differently. The thing is that when I talk now to entrepreneurs on the other side, when I have to deploy the capital, I become like the old banker, because entrepreneurs, they're dreaming, they're doing most of the time people come to me, my company having $10,000 revenue today, but we'll do 10 billion next year. It's a type of conversation. I'm exaggerating the numbers, but that's a type of conversation we're having, all right. So one of the other things that most of the institution is using to back that risk, they invest with business, as you mentioned, with track record, but when they see growth and they see a possibility for the base case, so the current status of the business, when it's debt, to service the debt or something like that. So they're looking at really, there is this portion that we're coming to have in mind that is probably another risk mitigation things. But what I wanted to bring is the risk perception is sometimes, and also for diaspora that is here, is unrelated to the real risk. Because sometimes we learn that when we are on the ground, when you're on certain market and you're close to your investing company, or you're close to the people if you work with, things that you were saying as a risk are redefined. It's other type of risk, because the population is in the country, the growth is, market is there, and the growth is there. It's not true that from one day to another, everyone will go to immigration in otherwise and will close business. They will be there, and the market will be there. So I think when you mention the things about the risking is also, and the high risk in Africa, I will contest that, and we can debate for a long time. I think the risk perception is sometimes wrong, and that's what can lead to a bad decision. And even if I can echo to what we discussed quickly before, I don't have the exact statistic, but if you look at the investment, for example, in what we call at World Bank IDA countries, which are the less, how can I say, lower income country most likely, and those type of things, when we deploy a lot of blended cap finance and those type of things, you will see that the return is not what you expect. It's not like we're losing grants and we need, etc. You see positive return even on those. So the justification for the risk, end of the day, is not really correct. That's just the point that I wanted to bring. Sorry.
I got mine. Okay, so one recurring theme, even though you didn't touch on that theme, maybe because they already touched on it, or maybe because you're hardcore technical actuarial, these are the numbers, people who get it. But if you notice, one thing that was said over and over and cannot be overstated is people. I mean, Yomi came up here and was like, wow, you guys put this together. That was the first thing I said to you yesterday. You put this together. I'm so full of awe, because when I was your age, I didn't know this was important. This is the most important thing you probably will do this year. You don't get it yet. But these networks of trusted people that you know, like, and trust, that becomes the basis for everything you do. You want to do business in Africa, you want to do this and this and this and that. If Mezuo hears my name on a document, he's going to say, do it. Uzoma is there. If I see Yomi, I'm going to say, do it. Yomi is there. It's that simple. I don't need to know what you're doing. You want to buy Gary in Lagos, I'll tell you, go to Yomi. Because I know Yomi, his word is bond. So what I'm trying to say to you is the first thing you got to understand is it's people. If all the contracts I've written in this world, there is no contract that I cannot personally break. That's the whole idea. If you get a bad guy in there, it's going to fall apart. So don't even get tricked into that. So the first thing is know people. Know people, get people you like, very important, and get people you trust, and do business with them over and over and over. And you will have mitigated a huge percentage of risk. It always comes down to people. So I'll give you an example. So one of the things I'm working on right now is a transaction that I discussed with Mezuo last night. I had someone come to me, I'm an attorney. All they said to me was, we are finally doing our first contract in Nigeria. It's a company right here, a bunch of white dudes out here in Louisiana. They've been in the business for 40 years. They know what they're talking about. They do heavy equipment. They want to go to Nigeria, they got a contract. So I'm going to de-risk the contract, your question. That was my job. You're the lawyer, write an agreement that de-risks this thing, so that when we spend $5 million and put it in Nigeria, that money comes back. And I said to them, there's no contract I can write that can do that. I had to say that from the beginning. If that's what you're going to pay me a retainer on, that's not going to happen. But let me tell you what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to understand who the counterparty is. They said, oh, well, it's a shell contract, but we're going to get it through a contractor, and then we're going to work with a contractor. I said, hell no. Back out the contractor, go straight to shell. Because that already reduces the counterparty risk. You see, that wasn't something I wrote in the contract. I said, get your business people to make the transaction go directly. One. Two, I said, here's what you do. Have you heard about EXIM? They had never heard about EXIM, the Export-Import Bank of the United States. It is a bank that's been set up by charter, been around for about 95 years. All it does is get heavy equipment manufactured in America, creating American jobs because it's being manufactured here, and finances that equipment and its export to anywhere in the world. And when it gets there, it gives you insurance risk. It insures the cash flows coming back from that asset. So I said to them, instead of taking $5 million and buying one piece of equipment, go to EXIM, get 4 pieces of equipment. You only have to put 15% down as your down payment. That's all they want. So now you pay $3 million, get 4 pieces of equipment, deploy them to Nigeria. We buy enough insurance to cover it so that even if Shell, who we're now dealing with, who is a very strong party called Renaissance right now, defaults, EXIM will still pay you based on the insurance contract we have. So I've mitigated the risk. How? People. I've mitigated with what? Insurance. And then I'm going to write a badass contract that's going to tie it all in. How you like that? Thank you.
That's practical and really insight.
And I'm cussing and my mom is right there. Hi, Mom.
Yes, I just want to, something that I forget, and it's really important to have in mind since we're talking about the whole Africa today, is one of the de-risking tools also that we often is quite impactful on our work, at least at IFC, is putting a program for multi-country program together. Because the thing is that, for example, when you talk about currency, you can have risk on currency in Nigeria, for example, in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, etc. But what we can take for granted is not going to be at the same time. This year it can be this country, the other going to be the other country. So by having the currency is not a good example, but by having a multi, if you get in the kind of like an insurance thinking, by putting a program that covers multiple countries, we're doing that, for example, for microfinance, it means that when one is defaulting in Niger, probably one is making huge profit in Senegal. So you balance your risk by having this coverage on the multi-thing, and that's another important thing that we do.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I do have another question that I'm curious about. Stemming off of what you said you consider yourself to be an impact investor. I'm curious, how do you balance your, making sure you're getting those returns in your investments, and then, making sure that you're being impactful as well? Because sometimes, focusing a lot on impact, you're spending a lot of money and you're investing, but like the whole thing is like, community development and building infrastructure, and like sometimes it can be kind of hard to measure, making sure that you're in the green per se. And this is for everybody.
Should I maybe I will start and trying to be succinct and quick on that. The first thing is, again, getting to the risk perception, but there's other type also. My opinion is that initially, when I was maybe younger in university, like you and I said, I have this term, impact investing, I want to do impact investing. I was not sure how I will do a comfortable living for that. I have been to Nicaragua, to small villages, LATO, in the small community, to design a poultry business for small community there. And it was, at the time, the grant I'm receiving for being there was like $500 per month. So I was not even sure I was going to make up with student loan with those type, if I did that as a long term. But the thing is that the spectrum is broad. So there is different type, what we define as, it can be defined as impact investing. I will simplify. My version is a little bit simplified. I'm doing, because compared to a commercial things, if you come to me today and say, I wanted to buy weapon, and I finance you, for me, it's a classical finance things that you're doing. The impact is coming if you say to me, no, I'm not in the weapon business, for example. Or I want to see what, it's difficult to have positive impact with weapons, so I'm not in there, and that's the thing. So there is a positive, can I say it, like impact that is happening. Then to the question on how we make sure we're getting all the investment we're doing as first, we have to demonstrate the financial sustainability first. because the most important thing in this field is to recycle your capital. If you lose your capital, your impact is limited. If you're able to recycle your capital, it's unlimited opportunity that you can get. Because today you have, for example, Yomi mentioned the numbers. You're starting with a small fund and then you're getting 3 times at the time. If you lose between that and you go to 0, there is no longer impact that you were achieving. So first thing is financial sustainability, and that's how you make sure you can deploy, and then you can make the arbitrage between should I go for the most return or should I go for most my return, is it quantitative in how can I say it, like IRR, like internal rate of return, or is it on access to electricity, access to water, and those type of things. But at the basis, you're not losing your capital, at least you're staying on business.
All right, so let me share with you, as someone who runs a fund that has mostly impact development finance institutions as investors. First of all, before we started managing a fund, I would say, I think any investment in Africa that basically grows is probably, as long as it doesn't have negative stuff like, is probably impact. If you're creating jobs, if you're positively impacting your community, it's impact. And that's what we thought when we were doing principal investing. And then we learned that there is a language and there's an approach to tracking impact. And for you to access, there's actually a lot of money out there. So this is the benefit. There's a lot of money out there that if you track and you position yourself appropriately, you can access. That's where the impact comes from. That's the positive side. And we do a lot to better track and better report. I will tell you that some of the frustrating part is that when you have a blend of investors that prioritize different impacts and sometimes are trying to almost force and change your strategy towards their impact leaning, it can be frustrating. I mean, I'm saying with all humility to our investors, some of which might be in the room. But that's the struggle. However, it's actually most investors and most entrepreneurial projects in Africa are impact driven and impact creating. But it's just learning how to capture, report can give you access to more capital.
Fully agree that if you're doing something on the content that doesn't have negative externalities, there's impact. I think that there are 2 key things I want to mention. The first is to think of investing or capital allocation as a continuum. Commercial rate returns, you could care less about anything else, just give me my return on one end, and philanthropy on the other end. And there's a whole spectrum in between, and just to bear that in mind. So you could have lower returns, more impact, and you can allocate across that. Now, it's also important, and Yomi alluded to it, is when you're raising capital, you want to make sure that you have investors that have the same objectives. Because if you have an investor in your fund that only cares about returns, another one only cares about impact, you're going to clash at some point in terms of what you're trying to achieve. The second thing is people say impact, but you also have to define what does impact mean to you, and what, as an investor, what do you want as impact? And you may touch on it as well. Because the investors that will say job creation is the most important thing for them. We have investors that also say that the number of farmers that we indirectly finance is important to them. The other investors that will say gender lens investing is important. And so also being conscious of what exactly is the impact you're trying to achieve, and then how you're tracking and monitoring and documenting this impact. Now, in that spectrum, when I think of how we've approached it, on our equity fund, where we do have development investors, but they're more concerned about returns, we talk about impact, we track, but we don't audit the impact. We estimate this is roughly the number of jobs we've created, this is what it means. In our private credit fund, we have investors that have said, we're willing to accept a lower return, but we want to audit your impact before we give you your incentives. So it's a very different structure, because we're then more diligent about how we counting, how we monitoring, is there real impact here? Because it's going to be audited, and that then feeds directly into our reporting, into how we structure, into our incentives. And it also means potentially that returns may be lower. So just being in mind that there's a continuum where you actually allocating capital, playing where investors coming from, and how you're defining what impact means to you or to your investors.
Thank you. Did you want to add something?
I don't think I have much on this one, but I liked what Mezuo said about the spectrum, and I think that's one of the things that at your level and your stage in life that you need to kind of disabuse yourself of, is this notion of black or white, yes or no, good or bad. You know, it's all spectrum, right? And once you free yourself from that kind of thinking, everything becomes possible. So there isn't impact, and then, yes, there's hardcore. You know, I would drive around Houston, and one of the things that makes me so upset, I don't like telling people I'm a lawyer anymore because I see those big signs of personal injury, call me. It's just the most embarrassing thing to me as an attorney, because that to me is not law. That is just the lowest level of charlatanism. You're just doing this to make a buck. There is no impact, there's zero. You just want as many people to get hurt and give you a call. So that's what you don't want. As a student, what do you want? You need to know why you're doing this. Henry Ford said, money is the result of doing something right, doing something good and doing it well. Okay, you take a problem, you want to solve it, you're diligent about it, you'll eventually make money doing it. So that's your impact right there. It's focusing on not just how much money is going to be in your bank account, but at what is it you're trying to be in this life? What are you trying to achieve? Once you have that impact in your mind, then you're able to play with scenarios, because there is no impact if you're broke. And also, if you go full tilt into the money, you might sell your soul out and not even have the capability of being a good person to create impact. So understand it as a spectrum to begin with. Ask yourself, you said to us from the very beginning, perfect question, what is the why? Start with why. And once you understand your why, impact will follow. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That was very insightful. Like, I myself learned a lot. I'm truthfully really grateful to be in the presence of you guys. I know that they told me time. I don't know, I'm out of time, but if you guys have any questions, I think now would be a good time to ask. Does anybody have a question? Okay, you go ahead. Oh, you said you?
Yeah, I've got a question actually.
Oh, okay.
And I'll
Sorry,
keep it
thank
as
you.
well.
Go ahead.
You guys talked about the idea of finding the right people, but also the way I view the world in general is that you can have the best ideas embedded in the wrong people. So, like you guys talked about having, like working with the right people as being like the key, risk mitigator. Unconstrained by the legals and like maybe different kinds of patents, how do you take the great ideas from the wrong people and move it to the right people and make money?
Yeah, I think we're struggling with the question. Could you rephrase?
Yeah, so you could sort of like see somebody who has like great ideas, but like your values don't align, and so they might not be the right person from a people perspective. How do you take, unconstrained by like the laws and patents, how do you take the ideas from them and put it to the right people and make your money?
The idea is not their own. Who says it's their own? Do they have patents, copyright? Nothing. No. Look, ideas themselves are not protected. The expression of the idea can be protected. That's what copyright means. It's not the idea that's protected. Because 10,000 people have said, there is no idea you're coming up with that somebody hasn't sat in their toilet and gone, wow. It's happened. So the idea is, was it protected? Was it put into a patent? Was it copyrighted? Or has the person expressed it and used it in commerce, such that if you go and use it, it'll be clear that you're just copying? So this idea of how do I take his idea? No. If you don't like him, he has the idea, you heard the idea, take the idea and go and do it. What do you care? Just don't do it the way he did it.
So I'll answer that in a different way. We don't back ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen. And I tell people, don't be scared to share your ideas. Execution is where it's at. So we look for people who are executing and who dare to fail, but go at it again and go at it again. I'll take the weak idea, but with the dogged, open, humble, I will take that weak idea and I'll listen to the smart idea and I'll share with him, and see how he executes. It's about execution. We don't back ideas.
We don't back ideas. I mean, and frankly, in many years of doing this, I've not met one person, one idea, and not seen it. I've seen many. So it's never unique. There's always somebody doing the same thing elsewhere. So for us is, okay, we like the space, the idea, the concept, the business. Who is doing it in the ecosystem that we feel we can back? And that's who we go for, not necessarily who we think is, there's never one person with the same idea or with one idea.
Sorry, can I add one? Sorry, one of the ways we do diligence on entrepreneurs, when we meet them, we challenge them, we see how they take feedback, and we just ask to see them again in 6 months. Like, where are you in 6 months? Where are you in 6 months? It's not about ideas, it's about execution.
Thank you, guys. You have a question. Oh, we have a few questions here.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Chidera Mania. I'm a sophomore studying computer science at the University of Notre Dame. I have 2 questions. The second one being for Yomi. First one, just for anyone. So the first one is actually about blended financing or blended financing models or blending capital models, as you guys said. I know it's realistic and it's feasible, but it's seriously complex. So I'm just curious to know how you effectively account for all the factors and stakeholders involved. And is there any room for like a tech instrument to assist in its structuring? So that's my first question.
It is complex. There are a lot of moving parts. That's where we call people like Uzoma to work through but yes, there is complexity in the structuring and making sure we understand the implications. So yes, tech solution. I'll pass on that. That's a harder to, because it is by the nature of the complexity of the structuring, it involves some thought process, which is not necessarily repeatable across. So and it's also tailored. So it's possible somebody in this room may come with a solution that solves for that, but lots of conversation with lawyers in different jurisdictions just helping us think through the issues.
Okay.
I will quickly simplify just on the tech part, and no, 2 things. It's difficult to structure, but it's all the financing product. Isn't private equity, we used to have debt, equity, different type of debt, preferred shared, etc. So the finance people, they use to complexity in structuring a transaction. That is just adding another technicality in that, but I think it's not that's the game. The question about technology, maybe you mean AI and new type of things. I think it's all the subject that we have currently. On the thinking, the idea, I think humans still control it a little, because we have to design, we have to do things and etc. On the execution, for sure it's helping. When you look at the way we're drafting our document now, or the way even we suggesting. Just yesterday, I received an email from a client, and we all went crazy at the office, called our lawyer. We need to reply to the email because he was writing. And then I called the client, and I said, oh, why did you take, it's a small issue, why did you take a lawyer to write to us? And he said, no, it's ChatGPT. I said, okay. Okay. So for sure, we're living that era, and so it will be more and more implication. With mobile banking also and those type of things, having things on the phone, etc., is more implication. So tech, I think, but you should help us think about it, because on day-to-day, I'm trying to apply AI tools to my work, and for now, just correct my email and those type of things, but I do some analysis for me and some mapping for client, but there is much more that can go on the structuring also about learning. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I had a second question, sorry. Okay. And also, that's very good. Thank you. As a computer science student, that's great to hear. So for Yomi, I had another question for you. So very briefly, my dad is an emotional intelligence practitioner. So he teaches emotional intelligence to different companies in Africa to promote better work culture. So you mentioned EQ. So my dad would be very happy if I asked this question. So I just wanted to know a specific example where EQ like prevailed over IQ, any time.
I mean, look, I gave an example when I spoke, right? We would go for pitches, and we switched. And we learned because initially we're just pitching how technical we were, and we basically changed our approach to say, look, we fast-tracked the technicality, and we basically stepped back and said, look, we know other people can do this work, but we're looking up to people like you to give us a chance. And I always tell entrepreneurs that when you're trying to break into a space, forget entrepreneurship. I want you to know that when you come to Africa and you are speaking Fonais, this is your accent, and you look fresh, you already have haters. I hope you know that. There are people who never left. They are looking at you and saying, who are you? Do you know how you disarm them by saying, auntie? They were like, okay. That's EQ. Like the gatekeeper can keep you from seeing the MD that you know. Yep. That's EQ. That's business. Calming down, humbling yourself, stooping today to conquer. That's business. There are so many examples that all I need to, that's it. That's business.
No, please, I want to say something on that.
Okay.
It can be overstated what Yomi said. It cannot be, and that's why he led with that discussion. Look, if you don't get EQ, you don't get nothing. Let me tell you something that just popped, and it came from your question. AI. All of you here are very intelligent people. The entry stakes to this school is you gotta be smart, no, correct? There's no dumb people in this room. But the smartest one of you right now is completely dumb compared to basic AI. There's none of you that can compete with AI. So your IQ has already become, what's that word you were asking, Yomi? Obsolete. And I'm telling you this because that's what we're seeing in real time in my practice. I have young lawyers right now asking me, so what should I do? What should I learn? I used to say, go read the tax code, go read the bankruptcy code, do some drafting, do some research. I can't say any of that anymore because you saw what happened to me yesterday. An email popped out from a lawyer. It was perfect. These technologies can do things that we had to have junior associates do. So the only thing I can bring into a room is my ability to sit in front of a person and connect with them as a human being. And once I connect as a human being, they'll use my AI, not his. That's it, because he got the same AI I got. How many law firms are out there? We're all using the same technology. LexisNexis, $250 a month. I can pretty much have that thing go argue a case for me. It's really that crazy what the technology is doing. So what differentiates you, and as you're sitting here, understand is something critical has happened in your society that didn't happen to us. Some of us have already made some of our retirement and some of our savings. We're gonna be all right. You guys are completely in the Wild West. For God's sakes, IQ is great. I'm not saying don't be intelligent, but all of you here already have that. That EQ is so critical. If you don't have it, put down your IQ right now and go and figure it out. The answer is, auntie, sir, good afternoon, sir. How are you, sir? How was your Sunday, sir? All of that stuff is very important. In America, in everywhere you go in the world, it cannot be overstated. If there's one thing I don't want to leave here without saying, that's why I jumped on that question, which wasn't mine, was that. Absolutely right. EQ over IQ any day at this point.
Thank you. You had a question? All right.
Thank you for this panel. I'm Brooke Johnson, and I teach here at Rice at the intersection of chemistry and Black studies. And so it's been great to have my former teammate, track teammate, Uzoma, lead this panel and to catch up with her from when I was an undergrad here, like 8 years ago or something like that. But my question has to do with, it's just great to see the work that's being done now. And I'm like, I needed this work. I get to teach the class that I wish I had, a class that combines both chemistry and African American studies. And so my question is like, for students in the audience, like, what are some things that y'all have learned from y'all's journeys of being educated in the West, particularly when it comes to like economics, capitalism, and what is something that you like admire about the Western sort of financial model, and what is something that you are more critical of and that you don't want to see in Africa?
Man, that's a professor's question. So first, first of all, there's a lot of jackpot going on in Nigeria today, like a lot of people just trying to get out, and I actually don't discourage it, because I think there's a lot of value in Western education and exposure. I actually say we have very smart people in Africa, but there's an upgrading required in many regards, not in terms of intellect, in terms of exposure, in terms of awareness. So I will tell you that I learned a lot and I appreciate my time here. And I actually, after analysts spend 4 or 5 years with us, we expect many of them, a good percentage, will want to go abroad. So there's a lot about the lessons. I think if there's anything, I think it's similar to what Uzoma said earlier, which is learn the principles, learn why they were created, learn how they were used, but don't be bound by them. You know, the question I was asked to speak about obsolete innovation. The innovation starts with you and I having a problem in front of us and recognizing the tools we've been given and the principles, but bringing it to the context that we're in and saying, can we try it this way? Will it work? Can we try it this way? And I'll tell you, and I'll give you a very simple example. Our first deal, when we started Cardinal Stone, I was the least financed. All my other partners had worked in financial institutions. I was the engineer and consultant, but I was the guy in the real sector. And this company had some vessels on a contract that they were trying to sell. To basically unlock some debt that they had. And I had structured a deal earlier that didn't work. So when it came in front of me, I structured a sale and lease back, right? But I structured it where it had a 200% return. So my partners were like, Yomi, that's not gonna work. I'm like, why is it not gonna work? They had this vessel on a contract, they were gonna sell it and lose it forever. All I'm doing is structuring it as a sale to me where I tie up the cash for 6 months, I get my returns and they get it back. What do they care if I get 200% return? I solve their problem for them, I get my returns. So my finance people, because of the returns were so high, were like, that wouldn't work. I am not a finance guy, I'm just a win-win guy. Guess what? That was our first Mez product into a deal that became our first principal investment. Because I took principles and I was trying to solve a context, a problem. So I think my point is, don't be bound by them, learn them, but you need to practice in the context and solve for that context. We need more innovators. We need you to come on ground.
Thanks. I'll give another perspective. I think for those individuals in the audience that can operate across cultures, across borders, I think there's a powerful advantage you have in doing that, because you can bridge cultures. It doesn't matter which culture, country, dynamic it is. Once you can do that, whether it's a language barrier, whatever it is, it creates opportunities to tap into opportunities that others can't tap into. And when I think of how we operate in Nigeria, it's very different from when we go fundraising internationally. In Nigeria, when we well, at least I'll speak for myself, when I operate, more relaxed, a little bit more informal, very relationship heavy, and my degrees are in the back. When I'm fundraising in Europe, in the US, my degrees are in front, and the language changes, and it's still relationship-based, but it's a very different dynamic. And effectively telling the story in a very different way in Nigeria and Africa versus the West. So being able to bridge that creates opportunities that is harder to do if you don't have both that you can actually operate from. So which is very important. So having that ability to bridge cultures or languages is, I think, is a very powerful tool no matter, what you're doing. Now, in terms of what is different, something that I've noticed and is financial transactions in the US tend to be very impersonal. It is, I'm going to short the market, make a ton of money. I'm going to allocate here. If there's a dispute, it's in court. It's very impersonal, and it's sorry, it's just business. That same approach doesn't work as well in many African countries because the courts don't work. So it's very relationship based. You mess somebody up one time, you're not going to have a second chance. Or at the same time, you treat somebody well, and that's your calling card afterwards. So it's very relationship based, and I like the relationship based engagement because it's about who you are, how you behave, versus the impersonal. So I'll say that. I wouldn't say one is right or wrong because there are people that do very well on just on the impersonal, but I prefer the relationship based, and I've noticed that difference between the two markets.
Thank you. Quickly, I'm impressed by what. Before answering to a question, I wanted to say it's look really interesting. Chemistry and African study. I'm looking forward to learn from that. I think we need some reverse coaching too on that front. Also learning from you guys too, and hearing from you guys what you think. On your question, I will say, for me, Africa also, we need to acknowledge the multi-dynamic on the continent. I don't think honestly there is education institutions in Africa like world class, top class, and nothing to envy to someone studying in the US or UK or somewhere else. So, but it depends on the country. It changes a lot. None of them are probably in the middle of the continent. Most of them in South Africa. I heard about African Leadership University also, and those type, and great university in Senegal, and those. So there is multi-dynamic on the continent that we need to acknowledge. I'm a little bit biased. I think maybe all biased on the because we study on the West End, so we haven't the plus or the minus. But what I would say, what I notice is like in developed countries, you choose institution over people. For example, I'm going to Rice, I'm going to Wharton, I'm going to McGill, I'm going to Harvard. I don't care who is the dean, who is the main professor, etc. I know the institution will carry that and bring for me someone for that, In Africa, most often, you can go to this place because the chair is the well-known guy, he did XXXXX. That's the same also in the medical space. Go to this hospital because the doctor is great, and etc. And I think that's a challenge that we're facing, and that we should improve in the continent. The second aspect is continuous education. And I'm glad that we're in continuous study building or something like that, because in the Western world, is people always keep getting new information, keep abreast, and conference and those type of things to learn. While sometimes you meet people in Africa, guys, he has a PhD 40 years ago, but he's talking for 40 years, then listen to someone for 40 years. So it's something that can be difficult. In terms of the bad part of the Western world is the silos. So many times we're getting onto silos. I'm expert in this. I don't go on these things. While as is mentioned, it's a spectrum. So you need to always be able to pivot. That's a bad part of my education in the Western. And on the Africa side is a complex, but complex is difficult when it's mentioned about when you come from US and someone is already mad at you because the way you talk is always a problem. And that complex attitude creates so many issues in the professional world in Africa. And on both sides, I want them to not have the complex because they travel the world, they can talk to everyone the same way, they can behave at the same time the same way. But also, sometimes also you're going on the opposite. So you're starting to not respect anything that is coming from the West. So it's a different balance, and long story to say that we're fighting every day to find the middle and the arbitrage for that. Thank you.
Okay. So sale leaseback just brings back memories. I got to tell you about that. But when I came to America, 1994, my dad he lives in Houston right now. He's a retired psychiatrist. Very smart guy, but didn't say much. I'm very talky. He's not a talker. But what he said to me on the driveway when we pulled into our new house in Virginia, the only thing he said to me from the airport, he said, okay, Uzoma, you just came from Nigeria, you're in America. And I said, yes. He said, okay, in Nigeria there's good things and there's bad things. I said, yes, sir. He said, okay, this America is the same thing. There's good things and there's bad things. I said, yes. I said, okay. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to take all the good things from Nigeria and take all the good things from America and drop the too bad. Can you do that? I said, yes, sir. That was the end of that conversation. That was the only advice I got from my father, is how to fix America. And that keyed me as a 19-year-old guy to go, wow, I have the option to pick and choose what is good. So everything that was cool about my Nigerianness, I held on to it. Everything I saw good about America, you take. So when you talk about that, the idea is free your mind. This world is your oyster. Stop being siloed. There is no reason to encapsulate yourself in some cocoon of being black or being white or being male or female. Who gives a rat? Just be you. Do what you got to do to achieve what you got to achieve. So he said sales leads back. I remember the first time I heard about a sales leads back. I studied accounting in college, and I was like, topic, sales leads back? Wait, what is sales lead? You mean I will sell you the property and lease it back? These Americans are smart. How can you? It was crazy to me. I never heard of that. And then a part of my career, I actually did something called LILOs. I just remembered. I was a LILO lawyer, lease in, lease out. We had a whole industry based on lease in, lease out. I can't explain it to you because it was so complex that the federal government came in and shut us all down and tried to arrest us. It was that bad. It was a financing structure that nobody quite got, but money was just moving. It was a spin on a sales leaseback. It was a sales leaseback spun into the nth degree. And so all of these products, you're learning how Americans are constantly coming up with these different products. The idea is there's so much here. Pick that up. Just whatever it is, pick it up. Learn it, be part of it. Go to Africa, go to your Africanness, your blackness, whatever it is. Don't ever, I always say to people, look, I consider myself a true African American. Africa will always be my parent, like my mother over there. My mother is there, my father is there. To say that I am my mother's son doesn't mean I'm not my father's son. I can be both. Why you gotta make me choose? I'm not gonna choose, I'm both. And whenever the situation comes in, what Yomi said, you go to Nigeria and you start talking Afune, they'll look at you and say, this one is fresh. And they'll punish you for it. You sit at that gate. But if you walk in there, kind of make sure your clothes aren't looking so snazzy, look a little normal, roll out with a little humility, hunch the shoulders a little bit, be like, hey, what's up? You doing? Nah, guy. Speak their language. All of a sudden, you're in. So you gotta have the ability to fly into Murtala Airport and immediately repackage. And the minute you fly back into Houston, you become an American. Hey, how you doing? You dig? That's what I got.
Hello, yeah, thank you for the talk. So my name is Quadri. I'm a grad student here at Rice, PhD in statistics. So I have two questions. First, I wanted to ask, you've spoken a lot about people. So I want to ask, how do you really judge people? Because there are times where people look like, people come to you, they have, ideas, they look good, and, once they get what they want, it can change, basically. And so how do you judge people? What's the measure you use to judge people? And my second question is, you spoke about risk. So how do you mitigate against political risk? Because there are times you could have great ideas, great execution plans, and government policies just crumbles everything. And so how do you do that? How do you mitigate against? Because we know in Africa, sometimes policies are made without regard to firms and all of that. And so those policies kind of crumbles you. And of course, we have a lot of examples that has happened recently. So how do you mitigate against political risk?
Can I go first? Real quick. Two things. It's been said before, get used to failure. There's nobody here who hasn't failed catastrophically. Okay, you gotta get past that. Somehow you were told that success is all about doing well and do well. You fail in a class is a bad thing. That was a bad thing that we were programmed in Africa. We were told you must come first. You must be the best. You must never fail. But everybody, you've read the book, Why Do A Students Work for C Students? Have you seen that? Yeah, it was a bestseller. And it's a true statement. And Yomi said it. Bring all of your IQ. I will take my EQ, go and get the contract and hire you to do it at a fraction of what I'm making off of it. That's how the world works. So get used to failure. You will fail. And with every failure, even Disney taught you that, you kiss frogs. In relationships, you will kiss frogs. In everything you do in this life, you will kiss frogs. And eventually you get to the point where you make it. It's a contact sport. You're going to keep making mistakes. The thing is, are you getting incrementally better? Are you using knowledge? Are you using experience? Are you using networks to make better quality decisions every subsequent time? And your error margin will keep decreasing until the point where you get to the point where, as opposed to at the beginning where you were doing 9 mistakes for every success, you get to the point where maybe you're doing 5 and 5. And that is more than a winning formula for everything you're going to do in life. That's all I got for that question. Thank you.
You know, when you mentioned the people comment, it reminds me early on in my investing career, a person I met that wanted to raise money from us. And I felt like he read the book of what we look for investors. He said, succession planning is so important to me. I want to build the next generation of business. Governance is critical. All the things we wanted to hear. So he just had us eating out of whatever we're saying. And there was a training in London that one of our investors was organizing on business integrity. He got excited and paid for himself to go to the training. We invested, and probably 9 months later, our money was diverted. He knew what we were looking for. It took 7 years of dogged effort to get every single dollar back from him. And that's another story of what we did, but we got the money back. But I mentioned that because it's hard to really know people, is the honest answer. And over time, there's some pattern recognition. You see just from the more you meet people, the more you engage, the more you recognize certain things and see warning signs, is being attentive to the subtle things and the inconsistencies. It is spending enough time. People can only BS you for a period of time. The more time you spend with them, the more their guard lowers, the more you really see who they are. And I think so it's a lot of that. And people also respond differently to different people. So one person might be enamored by somebody. A partner of mine may see something completely different. So also being attentive to what everybody else is seeing. So there's that soft part. What we've tried to institutionalize a little bit more in recent years is how do we give a little bit of money to you to see how you behave before we give the larger amounts. Because once people receive money, that's when they really begin to change. And so we do that little bit of money, see and how you behave. And then after that, we then say, okay, are we happy with what we're seeing, the engagement, and then we can then do larger ticket size later on.
So after 17 years, the first is profile. We actually have internally, when we screen our opportunities now, there's a certain profile we look for. I want to be careful in not sharing that. And let me just be careful to say that we are happy to walk away from great deals. We just want to avoid bad deals. So it's fine for us to miss, for our profile not to catch you, that's fine. We know the people that we enjoy working with. It's really important that we enjoy working with you. So profile, we have our profile. Track record. There's certain track records we look for. For example, as part of that profile, we have found now that we are actually not really good at backing family businesses. We are not. We are very hands-on, and many times, many family businesses do not like to share in all the decision making. Not all, but we just found that they're probably not for us. So we actually like younger, more open founders that have worked in structured institutions before. Because people might tell you as much as possible that they like governance, but how do you like what you don't know and you've never experienced before? We've just found that we'll rather work with people who have experienced it before. References. In the process, and I'll touch on something, we like prolonged engagement with experienced challenges along the way. We're never in a hurry. We want to know you. We want to have those tough conversations. We want to see how you act when you're angry, when you don't agree with us. Those things are important. Finally, we actually injected something, phased milestones before money. We've gone through really prolonged engagement with people who will say yes, yes, yes. And when it was time to close the deal, after we spent a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars in diligence, they walked away. So what we've done now is we've introduced things early to force certain things that they say they're going to do, to see whether they do it on their own before the money comes. And so we look for things to kind of block out the noisemakers. Thanks.
Just to really quickly add, because it's something that you touched on that I mentioned, reference checks. What we've found over the years is if we go back and ask around, people don't like saying bad stuff about people. So if we're doing reference checks and we're hearing, he's good, he's fine, he's okay, that's a bad reference. If we hear the person is great, he's incredible, that's a good reference. Because we've never gotten that person is bad, stay away. We've also gotten lukewarm. So for us now, lukewarm is bad because it means the person is not comfortable enough to speak up and put themselves on the limb to say you're a great person.
Quickly, I think I like this part because there's also maybe a cultural aspect also to it, no? Some people, some culture we value over us, some over it's, okay, I'm learning also, thank you for the question. Regarding the people, I just wanted to bring also another things, the spectrum again, because when I'm talking to the younger generation, younger than me, we're all young, but younger generation, it's now the black and white because all the answers on Google. So as soon as they challenge you on Google and Google says something different, it's like what you say was wrong and I'm true. So on the spectrum, there is on the people things either you trust no one, either you trust everyone, either you're naive and everything is good for you, either you say I'm cautious of everything that you're doing. Again, take the spectrum in mind.
Sorry,
find where you
2 minutes. 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Check whether you stay on that spectrum again. It's important to make your decision, knowing that it's not all black, all white, and you can do all the check that you want. You can fail on people things because people change and you change also. So something is happening in the things. I know I have 10 seconds, but the political risk. On the big picture perspective, I need to bring that within the World Bank, there is MIGA, that is a Multilateral International Guarantee Association, that is offering some tools for that. So that's on the tools and technical aspect that you can have. But on the broader fine, the political risk is as broad as the risk that you mentioned initially. There's so many different types of political risk that is on the market, and just want to defend a little bit the policymaker in Africa. It's not that they're doing policy to put business out of business. It's like in everything, my opinion is like everything in life. It comes with a good purpose. Sometimes it favor a party, it doesn't favor another party, sometimes the opposite. So it's always adjustment that maybe need to be quickly to cover the part that we didn't oversee. But that's something that you need to navigate and work toward doing your project and be able to be agile and to adapt. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Sorry, I know there are a few more questions, but we're like 30 minutes over. But thank you guys so much. You guys can meet them afterwards and ask them what